to sing of his history. I hope it will not take too long. He wandered all over this country on a bike with his children in tow. Now he's retiring, he says so, and his grandkids are raring to go. His grandkids are raring to go. His grandkids are raring to go. Now he's retiring, he says so, and his grandkids are raring to go.
Don't they look it?
He came out here from Chicago to escape Morris Janowitz rule and helped to make a department that was anything but old school. That was anything but old school. That was anything but old school. He helped to make a department that was anything but old school. An Ivy revolution was brewing, and Rich thought he'd join in the fray. He didn't know things were more complex, with sex, drugs, and rock in the way. With sex, drugs, and rock in the way. With sex, drugs, and rock in the way. He didn't know things were more complex, with sex, drugs, and rock in the way. Then tenure became a real question. Was Rich even going to stay? But Chairman Dick Flax worked the levers, and Bob Michelson rescued the day. Bob Michelson rescued the day. Bob Michelson rescued the day. Chairman Dick Flax worked the levers, and Bob Michelson rescued the day. The impacts of growth saved the city from greedy developer foes. As Harvey and Rich worked their magic, and yet our city still grows. And yet our city still grows. And yet our city still grows. As Harvey and Rich work their magic, and yet our city still grows. Here we go.
Five more verses.
Longer the slave of ambition, he laughs at all worldly demands, enjoying his happy condition, surrounded by kids, ain't it grand? Surrounded by kids, ain't it grand? Surrounded by kids, ain't it grand? Enjoying his happy condition, surrounded by kids, ain't it grand? Last time. He'll continue to influence students, a scholarship fund he'll endow.
Pass the hat.
Socio, global, and nano. Let's hear it for Rich Appelbaum.
That's amazing. That was longer than the Canterbury Tales. Well, it's an act that I'm not going to try to follow. I do want to correct a few misunderstandings. And I'd like to tell my version of the story.
Which story?
The story of how I didn't get tenure here. Here's my version, which Dick contests. That's actually an interesting little parable.
We'll decide that.
So, let's see. As Dick told this afternoon, when I was put up for tenure initially, it was turned down. The vice chancellor at the time, I'll name his name, Alexander, was an economist. And not a bad guy, but definitely was not in tune with what I had been
I thought he was a bad guy.
Not a bad guy.
Let me tell my story. You had your hour now. So I came to UCSB as a step 3 assistant professor, which is fairly high level. And I came because I published a book, I published articles, various things. Dick was wondering why they hired me. I thought it was pretty good, although it is true that I was never interviewed for the job. They just offered it to me. So I came here, and the reason I came to Santa Barbara, this is true, Diane Appelbaum, my wife at the time, and I looked at the World Almanac. And having grown up in Rochester, New York, gone to school in New York City, Princeton, and Chicago, I was ready for a change. And Santa Barbara had the most sunny days of the year of any place that offered me a job. Plus, they burnt the Bank of America down. And Dick Flax was here. So those were powerful reasons. So I came here, and after a year, the department put me up for a step 4, which, for those of you who don't know, is sort of the next rung, moving to tenure, and it was turned down by the vice chancellor, so I went in to see him. Long hair, beard, the whole thing, and demanded to know how he had the nerve to do this. And he pulled out this thin little folder, and it had one article in it that I'd written since I came here as, I guess it's related, Working Papers for a New Society, Volume 1, Issue 1, about how Isla Vista was a land grab of the University of California. That was not a good move. So I got my act together and started to become more of a scholar than the practitioner side. When it was turned down, I went on the job market and actually received an offer, tendered offer at Tufts University, which is where I met, where's Vicki?
Right there.
Vicki, where I met Vicki. Vicki was a student at Tufts at the time. And they offered me the job. Meanwhile, there's a new administration in, and they turned it around. The reason they turned it around, I think and I differ in this account, and since all of this is made up from memory anyhow, my account is this, that as Dick recalled, there was a new law in effect under the Freedom of Information Act, the California Public Records Act, which required, at least in the university system, any public position, that if you were, there were adverse findings in your file, you had to be informed. That law was written by a young attorney working for George Moscona, who at the time was a state legislator. The young attorney was Ben Bicel. And Ben had written this law, and it had been intended to be applied widely, but ultimately was only applied to public employees. I was never notified of what was in my file when I was turned down. Dick says and points out that he had, written a brief on my behalf.
Well, you were on a bike.
And also claimed I was around the world or something. Actually, that's when I met Karen in Wisconsin. That's a whole other story. Anyhow, I wasn't notified. When the university found out that I had never been notified, and Michelson came in, they redid the case, ostensibly fearing a lawsuit or something. And that gave me a new lease on life. Now, here's the moral of the story. Many years later, Rob Pearson. You still here? There you go. You mentioned that you resigned your current position at the time of the Bullocks project. So Bullock's Department Store wanted to put up a department store at State on Victoria Street, which was the home of a very popular store, as you mentioned, the Earthling Bookshop, and with redevelopment money. And Ben Bicel was hired by Penny and Terry Davies, who owned this little bookshop, to fight it. And Ben Bicel brought me in as part of that operation. And we took on the city council, the redevelopment agency, forced the public initiative, and defeated the Bullocks project.
And got
We had got El Paseo on the waiver. I will say on our behalf, we brought Nordstrom down. We ran a charrette where citizens could sort of construct their ideal downtown, and we brought Nordstrom in for the first time, and he was, of course, one of the actors there. So here's the moral of the story. The steering committee to defeat Bullocks consisted of me, Ben Bicel, Penny and Terry Davies, and Alex Alexander, the dreaded vice chancellor, because he owned property there. And he and I actually got along famously. We never discussed the fact, but I thought, this is a harmonic divergence. Here is Ben Bicel, the lawyer who wrote the law that saved my ass, and Alex Alexander, the guy who tried to get rid of me, all in one room working on the same cause. And there's sort of a political lesson there.
only in Santa Barbara.
Anyhow.